So, for this evening's entertainment, I have the delightful topic of sila, or morality, which most people who undertake any mode of religious training will be engaged in to at least a small degree. So, why does if you look at, say, like a humane or worldly perspective, why is it necessary for human beings to even have, say, keep a foundation of morality or observe precepts whatsoever? I mean, why should you? Why can't you just, in general society, just basically just do what you like when you like? But as it's quite clear to the vast majority of you that essentially that human beings have to keep their behaviour within within an acceptable parameter, because if we don't, our behaviour becomes an affront or offensive to other people that we associate with in the general community. And naturally we have like government regulations, we have community law, and then we have say, like, within the domain of personal behaviour, which is where sila or morality lies. And naturally the Buddhist system is very, very clear and articulate on the moral structure that we keep, and being based on the 5 precepts, the 5 Buddhist precepts for the lay fraternity, the 10 rules for the novice monks, and the 227 for the full monks, and the 311 for the bhikkhunis, the fully ordained nuns. So you have this underlying moral structure that people are essentially, if you're a religious practitioner, you're under, say, like a minimum, say, obligation to follow, because if you consider yourself to be a religious person or a spiritual person, but you're completely unrestrained, completely hedonistic, and you just essentially just do whatever you like at any time, that your behaviour is going to be a source of maybe great concern or irritation to the people who associate with you. So the bottom line is that when we keep say, like a moral baseline, what's the actual result? If we keep morality, a foundation in morality, what is the, what is the significance? What is the worth of that? And a lot of this is based on, like, common sense principles and observation. And so you just within your own mind, you can picture the people that who are who are good people, decent people, reasonably trustworthy and reliable, because naturally not every single human being is bulletproof. Even close family members, even mum and dad, have their both their strengths and weaknesses on a moral level. But when we visualize or bring those people to mind, essentially the person who whose behaviour is, say, based in say, like, goodness, wholesomeness, the kind of behaviour that we see is a sense of, say, like a minimum level of, say, friendliness, kindness, potentially compassion, trustworthiness. A person who has, say, like a baseline of, say, like essential human qualities on the heart level. And they're the kind of people that we like to associate with, the kind of people that we feel, feel good when when we relate to them, when we connect with them. They're not the kind of people who make you unsure or fearful or give you rise to doubt or worry or concern. It's the kind of personality which encourages a sense of, say, confidence and trust, at least to a small degree. People's personalities, their characters are, can be, people fluctuate. Everybody's character is in a state of change, and not even your closest friends and associates. They're not absolutely bulletproof. They're going to have their good days, their bad days. They're going to, they may be a source of inspiration or a source of disappointment for you. Depending what's actually happening at any day, say any day of the week. But essentially, the people that you feel are good human beings. You feel that sense of confidence, openness, trust, and you feel that you can spend your time with these people quite comfortably, which is a very very beneficial principle for, say, like good human relationships. So when we look at the structure of the 5 Buddhist precepts, not to number one, not to kill. Say like any being, and when we say like any being, it can be, say, small or quite large. Like the size of the size of an elephant down to the size of an ant, or even a small mouse. But the criteria itself is that particular being must have consciousness. And so naturally, the body and mind go together, body and mind complex. And when we talk about consciousness, the consciousness of a being, it's the four mental aggregates which make up mind consciousness, which lie within the sphere of that say that physical organism, being whether it's small or large. The mental aggregates of feeling, perception, mental formation, which is like the activation of say the full thinking process, and then the consciousness, the conscious awareness of that process. So that's the mind component, which lies within that individual or that being. So we have this intention. We don't intentionally. The guideline with the precept is not to intentionally deprive a being of life. So on the level of the mind, when you look at the way your mind projects itself from its base, as soon as your mind moves within the process of, say, thought construction and it's like realistically like emotional, say, activation, because your thought processes, without feeling, without emotion, your thought processes are quite neutral, and they don't really have any real power within themselves until you have say like emotion imbued, contained within that thinking process, because your feelings give your life color and experience. They give your life tangibility. So, as your mind moves, through, under the power of intention, your mind's moving in a particular direction, and it has a goal. So, as your mind moves from its, say like a base of stillness, a state of, say, like restfulness, the mind moves out, and then thought construction takes place, imbued with feeling, and then one sees exactly what one's intention is. Whether you want to, there's numerous possibilities you could move in. The classic things that people may want to deprive a living being of life because they're hungry, they're starving, they need to survive, they need to live. And when we look at say like wild creatures in the animal kingdom, they're essentially they're ruled by their predatory instincts, and they're not going to be thinking too deeply about whether they want to sort of spare the life of that rabbit or maybe that antelope. When they're hungry, predatory animals, wolves, big cats and the like, they're going to stalk and kill and eat that particular individual. So, but as human beings, we have this higher level of conscious awareness and the ability, this underlying sense, depending on the character of the individual, this underlying sense of right and wrong. And depending on your moral development, some people have this to say like a high degree. Maybe some people have it to a middling or to a say like at the beginner's level. So, but that's what makes us human, makes us like intelligent. We have the ability to make choices, and you can choose to move in a particular direction, and if if you're quite sharp and aware, you will have an awareness of the results of the direction that you're actually moving in. So the principle is the intention. You deprive a living being you deprive a living being of life with full with full intention. There are shades of grey. It's not absolutely black and white carved in stone, because phenomena is very, very changeable. The human mind's very, very changeable. You're going to see like an alteration in different scenarios and conditions. But so you could potentially take the life of a cow or a horse or some small creature because it's suffering. It could be maimed, it could be hurt, it could be disabled, and that small creature, or that small or large creature, if allowed to live, it could be could go on in incredible pain. And so, especially even with vets, they're almost like bound, at least to a middling to or major degree, to end the life of the small creatures which are brought to them, unless their owner protests very, very strongly, because there's always, like, especially even with medical doctors and vets and veterinary people, veterinary surgeons, people within the hospital system doing professional surgery, they're under a legal framework, and if they don't do their job within like legal guidelines, the potential for prosecution, for lawsuit, the potential is there. So this is why I've heard this on a number of occasions. People have spoke to me about this with their pets, and the owner knows full well when their pet is uncomfortable, or their kitten or their pussycat or their Labrador or their Doberman. It's in pain. Owners are very intuitive. They can see that quite clearly. But if you give your vet full rein, they may be quite what's the right words? Quite prepared to put to give your pet lethal injection, or I'm not sure if there's any kind of special gas that they use with animals in the surgeries these days. But they tend to like orientate in that direction. if an animal is suffering, that you essentially you put it down. So and then the second precept, not to steal, to steal the property of others, or to steal that which does not belong to you. So, but also there are shades of grey even within that particular format. So, if you may have the wish to basically steal something of someone's, just through say like pure greed or possessiveness, and but you could. It's quite possible that that person could have given you, say, like invitation. That individual gave you, say, invitation based on trust, where you can take my property, like any time, anywhere, regardless of circumstances, unless they actually set the guidelines. So it's possible you can take people's stuff, you can borrow people's stuff, but it's understood. You know the mindset of that person, the expectations, and you know where you're coming from. So you're looking at a stage of a step of awareness. You know where that person's coming from. You know where you're at, and it's understood the connection between you. Exactly what path you're taking in regard to this principle. So, but sometimes people they can take things without permission, but they are quite prepared to return them, maybe possibly in good time. Or you could have a person who steals a library book, or a person who borrows a library book, but they're not prepared to give it back for maybe 3 months or 6 months. So you're looking at sort of like variations on a theme. So to speak, and within the monks' rules, there's like 5 factors, where which makes it crystal clear exactly where you're coming from and the direction you're heading, and the number of steps that you're actually taking as you move towards taking possession of somebody else's property. So the third precept of speaking intentional lies to another individual. When if you lie to another person, what actually is your perspective? Is it outright deceit, or are you just telling maybe just a little white lie or a fib, or are you actually are you telling that person something? Maybe you could be softening the pain or softening the blow of some maybe traumatic or some experience which may be quite unpleasant to them, or something I've mentioned previously. You could be a nurse in one of the surgical wards, and one of your patients is going in for surgery. So you've got 2 guys on a ward who are friends. One's going in for both going in for it's a cardiac ward. Both are going in for cardiac procedures, and there's two particular gentlemen in the same room, been friends for years. So the gentleman goes in, has a full procedure, comes back, is in intensive care, in recovery, and then he asks the nurse who is looking after both of them, who's doing the prep for theatre, how did Bill go with his procedure, and she's not going to tell the second gentleman anything which is going to worry him and raise his blood pressure and affect the outcome of the anaesthesia, because you got an older fellow, 60, 70 years of age. You basically don't want to compromise him in any way, because if things go wrong, he could potentially die. So essentially, you may tell an outright, you may say mislead that person, or essentially tell a very very tell a very direct white lie, but your main principle, your main intention is to protect the health and the integrity of that individual. But in general society, it's I mean, to tell fibs and misrepresent the truth. It's just so easy. If you talk too fast, if you exaggerate, if you're joking around, it's very, very easy to slip and to misrepresent or distort the truth on some level. But if you look within yourself, why, all these precepts, they're essentially they're sharpening your mindfulness and your underlying awareness. Precepts are like training rules. They're principles which sharpen your underlying awareness and your mindfulness. Because without precepts whatsoever, that person's mind is just it's just all over the place. It's like potentially it's just like a minefield, like an accident waiting to happen. So if people don't have any moral guidelines whatsoever and are completely out of control, essentially they're just capable of absolutely anything on any level. And the fourth precept of sexual misconduct, and so within the sutta analogy, within its strictest, sexual conduct is to engage anyone, say like male or female, outside of a formal, say, boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife relationship. So if you play with anyone outside a known and recognized formal, say, emotional, physical relationship, then essentially that's on a physical level, essentially it's sexual misconduct. But what's the context if you're a single person, but you still like to connect with other people on a casual basis? What is the understanding or the criteria in that particular sense? And the kind of perspective I would have is, the bottom line is, if you don't harm other people, you don't harm yourself, you take necessary precautions as far as contraception, and one guards oneself against, and other people against HIV or STDs. I'm not the sort of, I don't have the mentality where I'd sort of get on my high horse and then start judging other people. I don't really consider that to be my perspective. But if people are sensible, responsible, because people, they don't want to be celibate unless you're actually planning to become a monk or a nun. The vast majority of people, they don't want to be celibate, but they're not necessarily interested in a say, like, full-time relationship. So from my, I've already explained the strict parameter, but as long as people are essentially sensible in the way they conduct and relate to other people in that format. And the fifth precept, not to take drugs or intoxicants which confuse and delude the mind. So probably quite a number of you have got quite a high degree of experience in this area, possibly previously or even currently. And so essentially that, and this is, many of you are aware, this is just another common sense principle that when we toke up, or when we maybe sniff some different types of powder, and we might inject certain substances, that we're looking towards an alteration in consciousness, essentially for both to change the mind, the consciousness, maybe to increase awareness, to increase paranormal experiences, to increase one's personal bliss, happiness, you know. It could be all sorts of different reasons. But you know, if you're in a state where, you know, and I saw this on a piece of material previously where they had a small group of people, you know, like quite sharp, bright young people in their teens, and then they got them absolutely whacked on, you know, on some very, very good quality cannabis, you know, at least, you know, probably 4 or 5 cones, and so they were really, really off their heads, and then they put them through a number of tests, and they had them walking in the forest and jumping over streams, and then, you know, there was a like sort of dialogue and discussion and questions and answer and test of reflex and all this kind of thing, and within their own minds, they felt that they were had quite a reasonable degree of control. You know, their coordination was was acceptable, you know, this and that. But you know, these people were, you know, I mean, completely, you know, I mean, you know, really quite, you know, what like, well, you know, wouldn't, you know, they if you put them under say like under really demanding conditions or you know, demanding tasks, or you know, you can just imagine something very, very heavy, demanding, stressful. I mean, you know, the vast majority of these people just couldn't perform whatsoever at their full intellectual capability, and which is completely obvious to the vast majority of you here. But you know, but naturally, you know, people like to do, you know, some people like to do drugs. You know, they like to change their consciousness, expand their consciousness, and whatnot. But you know, but the sensible thing would be to do in, you know, sort of in a safe environment with conducive people, and you know, essentially, so you know, you're not driving a vehicle. You know, you're not. You know, so you could be a babysitter. You don't want to get yourself maybe stoned or really high when you know, when you're looking after somebody else's children that may not necessarily may not work out so well. So essentially, you know, the intoxication effect, you know, once it starts to impair your faculties, your sharpness, your memory, which the vast majority of alcoholic beverages and you know, the smorgasbord of drugs which are available do quite successfully. You know, it all depends exactly where you're at. Most people, you know, because you know, drugs are everywhere. You can get them at the drop of a hat. And alcohol, the bottle shops are, you know, are virtually everywhere. You know, very, very easy to source. But you know, if you're a meditator, if you're a Buddhist, you may choose not to go that way whatsoever. And you know, even in the past, you know, where I was at, I'd be, you know, when I was a layperson, and I would, you know, probably went out on a Friday, Saturday night, and on particular nights I wouldn't drink whatsoever, because I'd be driving a group of people, and you know, you could just see how smashed people would get themselves, and they were you know, they were really incoherent. They were slurred. The coordination was out the window. They didn't know what they were doing, what they were saying. And some of the things that these people did were just absolutely crazy or incredibly painful, and you know, so you know, some people they see the limitations of intoxicants. You know, some people think, oh, you know, I don't feel relaxed. I don't feel comfortable when I drink socially and whatnot. Well, my attitude is, you know, why don't you just develop your people skills so you can actually talk to someone without having, you know, 1, 2, 3 middies or a couple of spirits or a couple of cones. You know, if you need to sort of you know, to sort of get off your face before you can communicate with other beings, that other people, you know, that sort of indicates there's something wrong there. And I'm not saying that you're a vegetable or you're dysfunctional or anything, but so you know, all of you are, you know, you've seen this many times, but from my perspective, if a person went to a party and didn't drink, I really believe this, that you can actually have a better time without being intoxicated. You can have fun and you can laugh and you can joke and chit chat and engage and entertain people. You'll probably be able to do this far more effectively than if you were sort of stoned or tanked up. So, a lot of these things are just completely obvious to people in general. Very easy to research these kind of things on the web. So there are many. There's great value to keeping these moral guidelines in everyday life, because when you've got that, when you have a sense of sharpness, clarity, and awareness, that means that both physically, emotionally, and intellectually, you are at your very best. I mean, who wants to be compromised? Who wants to limit, their say their emotional or their physical capability? And so in general society, by say keeping a moral structure, what's the actual effects of that? So you've got a person who abstains from intoxicating drugs and alcohol. What's the effect of that on a community level? So you usually find that that person, they tend to, their relationships with other people tend to be of a better quality. The relationship dynamics tend to be on a much more, could be say consistent or trustworthy the level. The person makes less mistakes, has less mishaps in life, because they're less prone to accidents and getting themselves into trouble or having, say like car accidents and this kind of thing. Because you've got a degree of like sharpness and awareness. When you're say like when you're fully conscious, and so naturally even from the health perspective, because because I worked in the psych area for 12 months or so, it's if you really go go quite heavily within the drug or the alcohol fraternity, and you really hammer it, that usually within a couple of years, you're going to start to see changes in that person's personality. And the what would you call it? The stability, especially the stability of the personality and the quality of their intelligence. So people, especially when they're young, they can really go, say really go hard with the drugs and alcohol, and they look like they're holding it together, they're doing okay. But as you move up into people can go crazy in their 20s, but when you move up into your 30s, that's when you really, you don't have the same kind of, what would you call it? Say like reserves. Once you hit your 30s, you'll see the aging process start to kick in, and if you really go over the top with the intoxicants, you actually see the effects of it much earlier, and those say like unwholesome effects, unconducive effects, they're going to come in a lot earlier, and they could actually stay with you a lot longer. So if you reach the point, especially with with cannabis and hashish and especially with crystal meth, if you really go over the top with that kind of stuff, that you could have symptoms and side effects which could easily stay with you for for 5 to 10 years, and potentially, I mean, it could just ruin the quality of your life and your relationships with your family and friends. You know, I mean, I've seen this at least, well over a couple of times, and so you know, there's a lot of say like benefits to remaining sober, and so you know, there was a particular sutta that the person who's able to keep a moral structure, they're a person who has, depending on your personality, has a minimal level of underlying, say happiness or joy to at least a small degree, because with the precept structure, when you observe the precept structure, it protects you from worry and concern and from fear and from shame and from those and from actually undertaking a wrong course of action, which will disturb and unsettle the mind. And because the mind works on say cause and effect principles, and so any person who keeps the 5 precepts, many of them have at least a minimal belief in karma and rebirth. So people who keep the precepts quite well usually find that they have a very, very full and firm belief in the law of karma, law of cause and effect, and the process of rebirth. And this is the reasons why they're actually quite careful in the way they conduct themselves in the general community. And because the mind, every single move you make under the power of intention, every time your mind moves and you think and feel, you're generating karma on a moment-to-moment basis. So nobody gets away with anything whatsoever. And when you start to meditate, that's when you become very, very aware of what you actually think, do, and say on a daily basis. And especially the regular meditators, people on retreat, their mind becomes a mirror for the quality of your mind or mind consciousness. So you'll see, you'll be able to see exactly where you're at. If there's been any underlying infractions, misdeeds, they will come to the surface, and they will come up with full awareness. But this is part of the process, part of the Buddhist understanding. This is where you actually develop your understanding and insight, because if we didn't have that underlying awareness coming into consciousness, you just couldn't see exactly where which direction you're actually moving, where you go wrong, where you actually go right in life in general. It's a matter of this kind of underlying intuitive awareness. So there's lots of but the proof of the pudding is the people who keep a minimum moral structure, whether you're Christian, Muslim, Hindu, in general, the tendency is the tendency is that they orientate more towards a sense of happiness, peace of mind, contentment to at least to a minimum degree. The kind of person who finds it easy to make friends, to sustain friendships. They don't get into problems and difficulties to any significant degree, and it just makes your life so much more more easy and smooth and less troublesome in the long term. So I'll finish it there, and I'll open the floor if anyone has any challenging questions whatsoever. No takers, no takers. Oh, there's one lady in the front. That's, yep. Lady in the crimson, dark crimson top, with her hand in the air. You're waiting for the microphone? She's waiting for the mic. Wonderful.
Thank you very much for a very interesting talk and a lovely meditation. I'd just like to talk about the drug influence. I have a friend who actually does biofeedback therapy with people, with computers, and they can pick up when a person's on drugs because their aura is damaged. It's actually got holes in it, it's damaged, and it actually can allow in attachments, negative entities, which can create the psychotic attacks. And unfortunately, there's been personal experience in my family. I lost my son through drugs, impure heroin. 30 people died in that month. And my niece, she just started experimenting with drugs at uni. First of all, just marijuana for a few months, and then she went on to ecstasy, and she had a psychotic attack and ended up crazy in Greylands Hospital for 5-6 weeks, and now she's out, but she's really struggling with coping with life. So it is a terrible thing. A lot of people think it's only marijuana, it's only this, it's only that. But some people are very sensitive and they get damaged very easily, and I just think it's very sad that people don't know the terrible consequences. It can ruin their lives. And unfortunately, with my son, it was given at a party, heroin. And heroin is a very, very strong drug, very, very strong. It just gives you absolute bliss, and people can't often resist that. And so, yeah, we really need to be very aware and strong and pray for the world, pray for people on ecstasy, people on, especially on ice. Also, I'd just like to mention, where I live, I had neighbours that were on ice, and I was ringing the police because this guy was screaming and yelling. 4 o'clock in the morning, he was having these attacks. They had young children, and I rang the police many times, and then finally I rang the council and had people come out, and I was praying for them, chanting for them. I'm a chanter, I chant and chant and chant. And a year later, those people are totally different. That guy hasn't been. There's no, I think they had a lab there for a while, and I was getting smoked out with the smoke from the place. Anyway, that's all changed. A year later, they've settled down. There's no screaming at the kids. There's no wild parties. There's no, this extreme attacks at 4 o'clock in the morning. No smoke coming in. So our prayers are very, very valuable. We can make a big difference to the community. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a very, 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 very good point. Infusing other human beings with positive vibrations. But was there anyone else at all? Okay, look at something. Okay, so we've got Jacob from Boston, USA. How can we best pursue a life career morally? For example, a doctor must give up or sacrifice time with family, which may create angst, regret, and sadness. All right, how can we pursue a life career? How can we pursue a life career morally? Well, I mean, it's probably not that difficult. If if you're a reasonably sensible person, and you understand what morality or precepts are. You're well aware of the benefits of following, say, like a moral system, within your capability. I wouldn't consider that to be such a struggle, but then you've got the personal things where doctors have to. It's like student doctors have to study, quite hard, or they may have to give up a lot of their personal time if they're, say, a specialist in the hospital system, or they're on call and this kind of thing. But you look at the big picture. If you want to move in that direction, look at exactly what the capability might be. I mean, some people might want to become a surgeon, or maybe a pediatric specialist, but these are quite demanding professions, and you could easily be working absolute minimum 9 to 10 hours a day and be on call on weekends. So which way do you want to go? I mean, I've never met any doctor who's told me that their professional practice was a breeze, unless they're actually working part-time, unless they actually sort of dictate the hours. So if you're a single person, it's not so difficult. But if you've got partner and children, just look at the big picture. I mean, just think what's going to happen. I want to move in a particular direction, but what is going to happen 3, 4, 5 years from now, and the options, the perspectives, and then that may give you an idea exactly what you're up against. Because these days people really have to work quite hard to make a living, to get ahead, to pay off a house and everything else. So you really don't want to make life any harder than it already is. People know to score economically the way things are these days. So look at the big picture. 5 years from now, 10 years from now. Where am I going to be? My family, friends. Do I have much time? Do I have much free time myself? Do I have like my weekends off? Do I have time for hobbies and interests, or am I going to bust my guts for till I turn like 65? So Ubal from the Maldives. It's a nice location. What are the factors that could build mental morality? So what I would say is awareness. The factors that build mental morality. Coming to an understanding. Doing a little bit of study. In this area. What actually are precepts? Why do human beings need to be moral? Why? What are the benefits of say like a moral structure? And sort of do a little bit of study and learn. Learn a little bit about it, and but essentially, you're looking at awareness. If you've got a person who's completely ignorant, without knowledge, without understanding, how can you expect them to be moral? The people that I see who are moral people, the components I see within that individual is that people who are naturally moral, who've never been forced by their parents or by their partners or this or that, usually find they've got some past life experience, so they've got the past karma, which is conducive to maintaining a minimum moral standard. From the time they're kids, they're 3, 4, 5 years of age, and you can see it within the personality. The kid has a sense of goodness. They're kind. They don't scream the place down. They don't give give mum a hard time. And as one lady said to me the other day, her daughter's had a little baby. The child's about 3 months old, and she said that the child lost her wings, meaning that the child had come from an angel realm, a Devaloka realm, before she was reborn as a human being. So the child is very, very quiet, peaceful. She smiles and but the kid's only she's only 3 months old, and she's already forming sentences. She's actually stringing words together, and she's at the beginning stage of forming sentences. So most youngsters, I mean, it's usually around like the 9-month mark where they really start to talk, as this registered nurse was telling me. So this kid is, this baby is really starting early, and she's in good shape. So, and but that same thing again, awareness, knowledge, information, you understand the benefits, you have this awareness of if I move, this is like intelligence, it's like emotional, intuitive intelligence. If I move in a certain direction, what is going, what is the potential, what is actually going to happen, the variables. Okay, Shamida from Dubai. How best can we follow the 5 precepts 100% of the time and be mindful 100% of the time? Am I being moral if I do not? Well, I don't follow the precepts 100%, the monk's rules 100% of the time, 16 to 18 hours of the day, all my waking hours. So, what my attitude is that just that same principle again, understanding, awareness. You have a good knowledge base. You know what you're working with, and intention. So as you move through your everyday life, as you walk and talk and you're chatting with people, and you're doing your job, do you understand exactly what you're doing and why? Roughly every minute of the day. I wouldn't say every moment of the day, because you're talking about from a second to second perspective, and the only people I expect to be completely mindful and fully aware, essentially, are people who are completely enlightened, where the mind is just absolutely razor sharp, and the mind's as pure as the driven snow. And these people, they just do not break precepts with intention, like whatsoever. The underlying causes are just not there at all. So, you just do your best. It's underlying intuitive awareness, and and trying to be mindful, 100%. Of the time, there's little tricks that you can do. You can do like a mantra, one mantra, so like a short mantra every minute of the day to sharpen your awareness, your mindfulness, your recollection. Because as soon as you forget the mantra, then essentially the mindfulness is sort of dropped at that point in time. Or you do things like you can do this very relaxed, spacious Mahasi kind of approach, where you label your mind and body experience. So, like every thought that you think, you can do this roughly could be every 10 seconds, every 20 seconds. You need to be a bit careful if you're driving a vehicle, or you're operating machinery, or you're looking after children, you're cooking a meal. But you can do it in a very, very spacious way. This Mahasi labeling method, which will still increase the sharpness of your mind. It's just it's a skill, that you can develop. And say, for example, if you're sharp enough where you actually notice an infraction, you notice that you're having a chat with someone, and then you just slipped, just very, very lightly. You just maybe told a very, very small white lie, or maybe you exaggerated. You got caught up in the heat of the conversation, and you misrepresented the truth. If you are able to catch that within the first 5 to 10 seconds, that's pretty sharp. So what a person can they can remind themselves, or the Tibetans have got a nice little practice where every time they break a precept, knowingly, they recite their Om Mani Padme Hum mantra 3 times to establish the mindfulness and the recollection. So every time they break a precept, they say their Om Mani Padme Hum 3 times and bring the mind back to its center. And it's quite it can be quite useful. So each person will see what practices actually are of support to them in the long term. So there's no more takers. So we'll shut it down. Call it an evening. Thank you kindly for your participation. So I'll hand it over to our friend there. Would you like to take the floor? I can't remember. I don't know your first name. Leha? Leha? I'll remember. Yes, there will be. There will be. I'll announce it tomorrow, and we'll get the sheets. We'll have sheets. How many sheets do you reckon I should print? At a guess. 25 for the regulars. Okay, shall do. 25. You're right. You're right. Did you didn't want to add anything? Shall we just pay respects and we'll split? Okay. Thank you very much.